Before talking about finishing a project, let's talk a bit about the supply chain and the procurement cycle. Supply chain issues include a make or buy decision, contract management, collaboration, and corporation. Then another issue is system integration. A make or buy decision is dependent on what kind of a strategy we need to use. Is it a strategic decision? Is it an operational decision? Or is it based on a financial and economic terms or constraints? But strategic decisions are having the top priority. Outsourcing is more of a situational decision. We might outsource due to a capacity constraint, a capability constraint, a criticality constraint, a time constraint, maybe a control constraint, or a confidentiality or a scale constraint. Activity can be a primary activity or a secondary activity. Primary activity are the core activities and they can never be outsourced. Secondary activity may be core activity and non-core activity. So basically there are four kinds of activities: primary core activity, primary non-core activity, secondary core activity, secondary non-core activity. We can never outsource a primary core activity. A primary non-core activity and a secondary core activity can be outsourced. We have a choice. We need to look on the trade-offs and we need to see if we need to outsource the such activities. But there is another category called secondary non-core activities. These are the activities that we should outsource. 9 steps in project procurement cycle includes a need identification or a validation and approval stage. After that, there is a source identification stage or a tender stage. The third is a preliminary source evaluation or a pre-qualification stage. Here we make sure that the sources identified meets the criteria. Next is a proposal request and receipt, that is a quote or a bid generation. Next is a techno-commercial evaluation. This will be followed by negotiation and contracting types on how to choose. We choose the contract and uh, make a deal. After that, we follow up and we focus on the delivery, receipt, and inventory. And final stage is a payment closure. The procurement cycle has 4 stages: plan, conduct, administer, and close. Let's also talk about the type of contracts that we might involve in. This type of contract is based on who takes more risk. First type is cost plus fixed fee. This type of contract is when the actual cost is borne by the buyer. Next type of contract is cost plus percentage cost. This is a contract where we we talk like, I will pay the actual cost plus a percentage of the actual cost. This type of contract is more risky for the buyer. Next type is cost plus incentive. That is, it is a performance is critical in projects. This type of contract is only for performance critical projects, projects where we have a time pressure. This incentive can also be a penalty. Another type of contract is a fixed price contract. It is a contract where the contract is conditional with respect to terms like the market conditions, etc. Here the seller takes more risk. Another type of contract is firm fixed price contract. This type of contract is unconditional. Whatever is the conditions, like the market condition, price won't change. This is best for an uncertain market. Next type of contract is a lump sum contract. That is, this type of contract is suitable for a small to medium work where the scope of work is not very well defined. Next type of contract is fixed price plus incentives. Another type of contract is time and material contract where man hours are considered. This is a type of contract where unless you set a upper limit, the cost always exceeds. Here we bill the man hours based on the how much hours a single person has taken in completing the work. Next type of contract is unit price contract. It is a denominator is fixed type of contract. It is a contract where the denominator is fixed. There are some other type of contract where we make sure the supplier also shares some cost. For example, a buyback or a return contract or a revenue sharing contract. A revenue sharing contract is based on a variable cost business like a laboratory that is paid per test by the hospital. Another type of contract is a quantity flexible contract. We select a contract based on the nature of outsourced activity, that is, how much risk, and the degree of market competition, that is, whether it's a monopoly, oligopoly, or a duopoly, etc. Then we should also consider the requirement that buyer imposes on you and the degree of risk for the buyer and the seller. Buyer's market is a scenario when we have a lot more suppliers. Here, suppliers should take the risk. Whereas in a seller's market or a supplier's market, we have more buyers. That is, buyers should take the risk. Selection of contract is also dependent on the performance period, the extent of subcontracting, the responsibility of the supplier or the contractor's accounting system, the urgency of requirement, the extent of price competition, the overall degree of cost and schedule risk, the cost versus price analysis, the type of complexity of requirements, etc. The basic commercial terms to agree in a contract include the unit measurement, the delivery or schedule, the duration of contract, specification, indemnity, that is, if a failure happens, how you protect against the loss, the late delivery compensation, the risk purchase, the payment terms, the warranty, the validity, commitment on performance, compliance, performance requirement, liability, price, the service requirement, termination, the incentive, the guarantee, etc. Some types of guarantee includes advanced bank guarantee and performance bank guarantee. Performance bank guarantee depends on the equipment performance. There are two types of project procurement approaches, adversarial approach and a corporative approach. We can talk about these two classifications in terms of atmosphere, relationship, and barriers in the procurement process. Adversarial approach and corporative approach talks about the difference between traditional and partnering project procurement processes. Adversarial approach is a transactional approach. It is a win-lose approach where adversarial problem solving takes action. Adversarial approach is where we have a frequent contract claim. Whereas for corporative approach, the project partner it is following a project partnering approach. That is, we follow a win-win approach. There is a joint problem solving approach and there are a few contract claims. Adversarial approach is a project by project contract. It is a independent project term. Adversarial approach has independent project terms. This is a procurement approach where the risk gets transferred, whereas corporative approach has a long-term contract and it has a shared risk. It has a joint project term. Coming to the barriers, adversarial approach has a continuous improvement discouraged by the short-term contract. It has limited cost discussions for competitive advantage. This is used when we have multiple buyers. Whereas corporate approach has a continuous improvement requirement. It is actually required and all useful information are shared. Here costs and profits are freely discussed. Example, a new technology or we need a continuous engagement with supplier. Other types of procurement contracts include open tenders and closed tenders. That is, closed tenders means many information are unknown. Another type of classification is limited versus unlimited procurement contract. That is, a tender is available to only some suppliers. That is limited procurement contract. Unlimited means the tender is available to all the possible suppliers or available suppliers. Another type of procurement contract is auction versus reverse auction. Reverse auction is where we give order to who quotes the lowest. Auction is where we give the order to who quotes the highest. So before coming to the closeout phase of this project management course, let's talk a little about execution also. Execution is nothing but do what we planned. It reflects the quality of our plan and the commitment of the team towards the project. A project with poor plan will obviously result in a poor execution. Execution is the phase where we implement methods and standards. Here we approve the changes and adapt into project. We adapt the changes into project scope, plan and environment. This is the most difficult phase in the project management. Here we create, control, verify and validate project deliverables. Execution phase is where we manage the risk and implement risk response activities. Execution phase is where we apply the corrective actions to bring back the project performance within the threshold. In the execution phase, we apply the containment and corrective action and we implement the correction. This is the phase where we also implement the preventive action. As we talked before, closeout is where the contractual closure happens, the administrative closure, knowledge management, and the operationalization of the project. Here, the customers accept the project deliverables. The project can close as planned or be terminated early. This is the phase where we complete the close. This slide talks about terminating a project early. It can be of two types: terminating for a cause, that is something that results from a problem with the project's course, schedule or performance, or it can also indicate the confidence, the lost confidence in the contractor. Another way to terminate project early is termination for convenience of the buyer. Here, the buyers face unexpected difficulties or changing priorities. The customers need changes and they invoke a contract clause. Heading off the early termination, how can we do that? Find other stakeholders in the customer organization or elsewhere who can provide some funds to keep the project viable. Look internally to find ways of continuing with the project at lower cost. Project managers present the facts of project progress and make recommendations for early termination if they feel it is warranted. While finishing the project, customers are asked to accept the project deliverables and provide feedback. Lessons learned are captured and shared. All contracts are closed. Participants are reassigned and rewarded. Reports are created and archived. Success is celebrated. The project team ensures that the customer receives the ongoing support they need to successfully use the project deliverables. Here we keep the right workers engaged until the project completion. Maybe we have to integrate the other uh, remaining deliverables into another project or stop working altogether, or we might continue deliverables as a lesser project or a running project. Here we finish the project as it is and part as friends. Project customers can provide valuable feedback concerning the project process and results. The customer formally accepts the deliverables once she is convinced they will work as planned. Upon approval, the project transition from the executing stage to the closing stage. Knowledge management is another part of uh, closure. That is, knowledge management should occur throughout the project lifecycle. The knowledge management is most apparent as the project comes to a closure. It captures the lessons learned and disseminate the use of lessons learned. When we talk about lessons learned, we talk about what went well and what do the project team members think that should be copied and adapted for the future work. Lessons include areas for which a different method may yield better results. Lessons can also be captured at milestones and at endpoint of the project. Lessons learned according to PMBOK is a learning gained from the process of performing the project. Lessons learned may be identified as at any point. We can establish a method for documenting and sharing the lessons learned, and we need to decide how to store lessons so all workers in the company can easily access them. We need to code each lesson by type of project, stage in the project lifecycle, and issue it concerns to aid future teams search for lessons that applies to them. During the administrative closure, we ensure that all the work has been completed. That is, we review the project charter, WBS schedule, we review the communication plan, the customer feedback, the project closeout, and we reassign the workers. Here we complete the closeout reporting, including the summary status, the lessons learned, the review of the project's original justification, etc. This is a template for closeout report that can be used in projects. Uh, a formal procurement audit may be conducted on larger projects while performing the contract closure. We verify that proper methods are used for all purchasing, that all contracts have been successfully completed. We verify that all deliverables were accepted and that all money has been properly distributed and accounted for. We verify that all property has been returned. We also provide ongoing support in the name of training, change management, and other services. The project transition plans are a sort of charter for the customer, and this is a summary. Some projects may be terminated early in their life cycle, or some projects will terminate uh, maybe in the later phases, or some projects will uh, close out as a natural course of action. Let's talk about negotiation. What is negotiation? Is it an inbuilt or a developable talent? Let's see. When we talk about negotiation, there is six basic questions that we need to ask. This is the basic thinking in negotiation. Why are we negotiating? What are we negotiating? How are we negotiating? When are we negotiating? Where are we negotiating? And with whom are we negotiating? Negotiation is a process that facilitates agreement when some of your interests are shared and some are opposed. Negotiation is an integrated process that involves bridging positions and evolving communications to get from an opposition to consensus. It is about managing conflicts, and ultimately, the final goal is to reach an agreement. Effective communication, consensus management, outcome management, conflict management, they are essential part of a negotiation. There are six characteristics for a negotiation. We need a minimum of two parties to negotiate. We have conflict of needs and desires between the parties we negotiate. We need a give and take in positions when we negotiate. We need to negotiate by choice with an expectation of favorable outcome. Negotiation is a constant search for agreement. It's a management of tangible and intangibles. We always negotiate to reach some goals. Negotiation is highly perception driven. Maybe our the party that we are discussing with might not know some information. We might not know some information. We are looking at all these perspectives while we negotiate. It involves a manipulation of information, making new relationships, sharing and oppressing interests. Negotiation is a process that manipulates options and alternatives to leverage favorable attributes to reach some outcome, a favorable outcome. There are five categories of goals when we have a negotiation. One, we can have an aggressive goal, a competitive goal, a cooperative goal, a self-centered goal, a defensive goal. Each of these terms is self-explanatory. Context is really important while we get into a negotiation table. The structure and sequence of what are the topics that we discuss, the pattern of communication, the method we communicate, the level of trust we have with the other party, the level of trust the other party has in us. What are the norms, the unwritten rules, and the values that we need to uh, foster in this negotiation? These are all contextual topics in the negotiation scenario. How much level of interdependence we have with the other party? Who has the power in the in between the two parties? What is the reputation and credibility of the either of the parties? Some common best practices and guidelines when we negotiate include: separate people from problems, separate issues from relationships, separate facts from emotional level, focus on interests and not positions, invent options for mutual gain, invent options for mutual gains, insist on objective criteria, arrive at an agreement based on consensus. Ultimately, a negotiation should lead to either an outcome or a relationship. Based on the style, strategy, and tactics, negotiation can be of two types: distributive negotiation or an integrative negotiation. Distributive negotiation is where two or more parties compete over a fixed sum of value. It is where one party's gain equals the other party's loss. A traditional system. Distributive negotiation is not for a win-win situation. It's a zero sum or a constant sum game. We are not flexible to adapt to the other party's wants. Distributive negotiation is where we are hard on people and we are ready to sacrifice relationships for our negotiation viewpoint. But integrative negotiation is where we are hard on problem and we are focusing on relationship building. Integrative negotiation is based on a collaboration and a motive for win-win situation. Some other classifications of negotiation include hard soft negotiation. Hard soft negotiation means hard negotiation is a victory focused uh, contest, whereas a soft negotiation is an agreement focused understanding. Hard negotiation is a contest of wills. Another type is adversarial negotiation. Adversarial negotiation is a competitive zero sum approach where each party seeks to maximize their own goals, their own gain, often at the expense of other. This style is characterized by aggressive tactics and focusing on winning rather than mutual benefit. Zero sum situation refers to a scenario where one participant's gain or loss is exactly balanced by the loss or gain of other participant. Another type of negotiation is a bad faith negotiation. It's a negotiation where we have to get into a negotiation table not for our good but to make someone's position miserable. Another type of classification is we can classify negotiation into four as lose lose negotiation, win win negotiation, win lose negotiation, and lose win negotiation. That is also self explanatory. How integrated negotiation differs from a distributed negotiation. Integrated negotiation uh, fosters open sharing of information. It is based on mutual goals and explanation. It is based on relationship building, and it's a trade of valued interest. Distributed negotiation is about forcing and self goals. It's about positional discussion. It's about a demand of interest, and it's more about hidden information. It's about manipulating hidden information and making a lose win. This talks about the trade-off between hard negotiation and a soft negotiation. Hard negotiation is based on adversaries, victory focused, distrust. It is based on the contest of wills. It is based on pressurizing and consensus consensus as a condition for relationship. Soft relationship is a more flexible one. It is based on trust and understanding. It is based on mutual consensus, and it is for making friends and a friendly talk. These are the other types of negotiation that I talked about: adversarial negotiation, collaborative negotiation, multi-party negotiation, bad faith negotiation, etc. Now, now let's talk about conflicts, the different kinds of conflicts that can occur during a negotiation. There are four types of conflicts: intrapersonal conflict, interpersonal conflict, intra-group conflict, and intergroup conflict. Intrapersonal conflicts or intra-psychic conflict is a conflict within the individual. Intrapersonal conflict is a conflict among or between individuals. Intra-group conflict is a conflict within a group, whereas intergroup conflict is a conflict among between groups. Two types of conflicts include functional conflict and dysfunctional conflict. Functional conflict can be further classified as a resource conflict or a process conflict, whereas a dysfunctional conflict can be classified as a relationship conflict. Functional conflict is another term for task conflict. Task conflict is something we can have a certain level of tolerance for. We need to consider task conflict is not a bad thing. We need to consider each person's perspective and resolve the task conflict one by one. But relationship conflict is not a good thing. We need to have zero tolerance for a relationship conflict. Various approaches in managing conflict include a competing style, avoiding style, accommodating style, compromising style, collaborating style, etc. Relationship conflict is an interpersonal conflict. It is a conflict between individuals. It is a conflict between roles and responsibilities. It shows a lack of commitment and a communication failure. These are personality conflict. Whereas task conflict is a conflict between stakeholder expectations, a unique project team, or a conflict between uh, approaches to performing some processes, etc. There can be two dilemmas when we talk about mutual adjustment: a dilemma of honesty and a dilemma of trust. Dilemma of honesty is a concern about how much of the truth to tell to the other party, whereas a dilemma of trust is a concern about how much should negotiators believe what the other party tells them. This is about the style of handling conflicts. Competing style is used only when a quick decision is necessary. That is, we are sure that we are right, and from others is not needed. An accommodating strategy should be used when only when we know that we are wrong and it is more important that the other party or it is more important to the other party or that we are after something bigger later. Compromising strategy is used only when an agreement is unlikely. That is, both sides have equal power and each is willing to get part of what they want without taking more time. The collaborative strategy is used when we have a thought like whenever there is enough time, trust can be established. The issue is important to both sides and buy-in is needed. A collaborative strategy is used when we have high concern for ourselves and high concern for others. When we talk about negotiation, there are three terms to understand: BATNA, ZOPA, and WATNA. BATNA is the best option, best alternative to the negotiation agreement. BATNA is the preferred course of action if a deal does not take place. For example, a reservation price. ZOPA is a reservation price for both parties when the negotiation concludes. ZOPA talks about a value creation through trade. If there is no ZOPA, there is no agreement. ZOPA talks about a range of values. For example, if two parties negotiate for a bid on a construction project and one party talks about a bid that is worth 1 crore and the other party talks about a bid worth 2 crore and they have to negotiate and reach a consensus between this 1 crore and 2 crore, then the ZOPA is between 1 crore and 2 crore. WATNA is the worst alternative to a negotiation agreement. BATNA's 5 steps are alternatives, options, best option, comparison, and decision. Analyze the alternatives, find the options, find the best option, compare, make a decision. Negotiation is a dynamic process. Opinions are continuously invented. Four guidelines for an integrative negotiation are: separate people from problem, that is, relation should be kept separate from issues. Fact should be kept separate from emotions. Negotiation should be interest oriented. It is about interest and not about positions. We develop the criteria that a solution must fulfill. You should have 2 to 3 options to choose from. That's an objective criteria. 5 basic negotiating strategies are: we can plot these strategies in a Cartesian plane based on their assertiveness and cooperation level. The strategy that is low in cooperation and high in assertiveness is called competing strategy. That is not a long-term relation. A strategy that is high in cooperation and high in assertiveness is a collaborative strategy. That is a win-win strategy. That is an ideal strategy. A strategy that is low in collaboration and low in assertiveness is called as the avoid strategy. The strategy that is high in cooperation and low in assertiveness is called an accommodative strategy. It is a long-term relation. An accommodating strategy fosters a long-term relation between the negotiating parties. A strategy that takes a middle path, that is, with this strategy has a medium assertiveness and a medium cooperation level. That is called as a compromise strategy. Concept in negotiation is called as discounting tactic. It is nothing but porting blame for other party and forcing them back foot. I talked about BATNA and ZOPA already. BATNA is the best alternative to the negotiation agreement, and ZOPA is a reservation price for both the parties at the end point. These are the 5 steps in BATNA. Alternatives if negotiation fails. Options: what is the most promising alternative? BATNA, the best choice. The comparison and the decision made. Bargaining zone is a space between the buyer's reservation price and the seller's reservation price. That is, it is a zone of possible agreement. If buyer's reservation price is greater than the seller's reservation price, then the positive bargaining zone exists. The zone of agreement is from SR to BR, that is, seller's reservation price to buyer's reservation price. Now, if the buyer's reservation price is less than the seller's reservation price, then there is no zone for possible agreement. These are the 4 phases of a negotiation: introduction, purpose, ground rules, and agenda. These are the phases post negotiation, that is, concluding the negotiation, reaching an agreement, recording everything, reinforcing everything, signing off, and evaluating the effectiveness of the negotiation. Uh, Essential terms to understand when we get into a negotiation are some of the contract terms. A term means the length of the contract. Renewal means what happens at the end of the term. Termination of course means this addresses the termination prompted by a breach of contract. Termination of convenience means it addresses a termination for reasons other than the breach of contract. Some tactics that we can use in a negotiation include hard tactic, control tactic, trap tactic, concession tactic, etc. A well-crafted negotiation will play with all the basic elements of negotiation. The art of negotiation includes logic, emotion, recognition, and always act and never react. Negotiation follows a cycle. There is a pre-negotiation phase, a negotiation phase, and a post-negotiation phase. Some barriers to a successful negotiation include not being open about the desired outcome, not being clear in their own mind about what to negotiate and what are the terms to reach as an outcome of negotiation, not revealing the truth. Negotiation breakdown can be used as a strategy in fruitful negotiations, but here when we talk about negotiation breakdown, we are not talking about it as a strategy. Normally, negotiation can break down uh, naturally, or an impulse can happen not as a strategy but naturally because of the following reasons: a lack of trust, a baggage of history, insufficient address of needs, undue influences, incompatible needs, perception issues, negative feeling, and unreasonable expectations. This is about a natural breakdown of negotiation, and it's not about a purposeful negotiation breakdown. As we reach this last part of the project management course, let's discuss a little bit about the frameworks that are available in project management as of today. So far, we talked about the methods and strategies that can be used in a PMBOK framework. All we learned so far is following PMBOK framework. PMBOK framework is just one of the project management framework that is also a cornerstone, and 70 to 80% of the projects today in their project life cycles use PMBOK framework. Another common project management framework is a waterfall framework. It is also called as a traditional project management framework. It follows a well-defined sequence of activities. It is not an iterative process. It follows a sequence like the requirement gathering process, designing process, implementation process, testing process, deployment process, and maintenance process. That is the life cycle of waterfall, and it doesn't repeat. Once the project transitions from requirement process to design process, it cannot go back to the requirement process again. Waterfall framework is well defined, and there can be no changes in the life cycle once a phase is completed. Waterfall framework is suitable when there is a lot of certainty in the project. Project management frameworks provide structured approaches for planning, executing, and closing projects efficiently. As I told, waterfall framework is a linear and sequential approach, and it has a requirement, design, implementation, testing, and deployment and maintenance phases. Let's talk about agile framework. Agile framework is an iterative and incremental framework. It is suitable for highly complex projects with high uncertainties. Agile frameworks encourage flexibility and collaboration. It fosters visibility as we move along, but the visibility at the beginning when we start the project is very, very less. This is suitable for projects with unclear requirements, where the requirements expands or progressively elaborates as we move along the project. Highly progressively elaborate. PMBOK framework has a limit to accommodate changes in scope, but Agile doesn't have it. And Agile's visibility is only 3 to 4 weeks. Agile frameworks include methodologies like Scrum and Kanban. Scrum is a methodology where we incorporate daily stand-ups, and it has the following roles: a Scrum Master, Product Owner, and a development team. Example, a new product development is happening. and or a new infrastructure development is happening. And since the project concept is not fully clear, when we start the project, we go through multiple iterative phases to reach a clarity on acceptable levels in the project delivery. There are some Scrum terminologies and called artifacts. Artifacts in Scrum methodology are product backlog, sprint backlog, increment, etc. Increment is a potentially shippable product. Some examples of Scrum events include sprint planning, daily stand-up, sprint review, sprint retrospective, etc. Another agile methodology is Kanban. Kanban is a continuous improvement process, but it is slower than the Scrum methodology. It is less iterative than Scrum. PMBOK is a sequential approach, but Agile is not more of a sequential approach. We might have heard of a term called as Lean. Lean means maximizing the value and reducing the waste and minimizing the inputs in a project or a process. Agile is nothing but Lean plus flexibility. Agile is more iterative and dynamic. Example, an ERP system. Another framework, so this is talking about Agile. This is talking about Kanban. Kanban uses boards to track the task. It focuses on continuous delivery and limiting work in progress. Next, we also talked about lean projects. Lean focuses on reducing the waste and maximizing the value. It's rooted in manufacturing but applies in various industries. Now, another project management framework is Prince 2 approach. Prince 2 approach is a structured, process driven methodology. It is a projects, it runs projects in a controlled environment. Example, building a vaccine. It has no generalized life cycle, but each project will have customized set of life cycle. It is driven by roles and responsibilities. It focuses on business justification and it is highly scalable. It is tailored to the projects of any size. For example, a Gaganyaan project, or it is highly suitable for large scale projects. Roughly, we can say that the life cycle of a Prince 2 approach is uh, starting up the project, directing the project, initiating a project, controlling stage, then managing the project delivery, managing stage boundaries, then closing the project. There is huge difference between an agile framework and a PMBOK framework. These are the principles of Prince 2 framework. It focuses on the products. It is tailored to suit the environment. It's learned from the experience. It is continued. It is focused on continued business justification. This is the process model for Prince 2 model. It is not a well-defined life cycle, but maybe but it's a rough direction for creating a life cycle for Prince 2 framework. This is about PMI's PMBOK framework, which is an industry standard by PMI. It includes 10 knowledge areas and 5 process groups. It focuses on standardizing the project management practices. Waterfall framework is best for the structured projects with clear requirements. Agile framework is ideal for adaptive and flexible projects. Lean framework is best for focusing on efficiency and waste reduction. Prince 2 framework is best for large scale projects with defined process. PMBOK framework is suitable for standardized approach and for managing projects across industries. You can also reject frameworks. You can reject all the frameworks that I have mentioned uh, just now, and you can run the project in an ad hoc approach. But incurring money and resources, when we run a project in an ad hoc approach without following any project lifecycle processes, any project frameworks, we incur money and resources unnecessarily and without any guarantee to success. The probability of failing is much higher when we follow an ad hoc. With that, I conclude this course and thank you all for listening.